Good morning, those of you who have joined the webinar already. This is Tim Christian from KW2. We're going to get rolling now. All the attendees have logged in. So thanks a ton for attending our webinar today, Higher Value Analytics for B2B Marketers specifically. This is part 3 in a series that we've done throughout May. If you weren't able to attend part 1 or part 2, in the email that you'll get this afternoon, there'll be a link to the recordings from those 2 webinars. So if you have the chance to check those out, we encourage you to do that because it was a bit of a stepping stone process to get us to part 3, talking about understanding the value and then trying to calculate ROI of your marketing efforts. So you'll get that link after the webinar this afternoon. A quick review on who KW2 is. We are a full service advertising and digital agency based in Madison, Wisconsin. One of our primary business segments is B2B and B2C customers such as yourselves. There's a smattering of logos up on your screen of current clients of ours that we help, especially in this analytics and measurement plan ROI world. Some of our clients, that's really all we even do for them. We just supply analytics thinking and insights to how their websites are performing. So that's who we are. Today, you'll be hearing from myself. I'm the Vice President and Director of Digital Services, Allison Trapp and Claire Lemke, who are both user experience designers here with KW2 and have a great deal of knowledge to share on the how to understand ROI from the insights you get from analytics. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the series there was part 1, part 2. Like I said before, we'll get those links. Today, we're going to focus on understanding the value you get from Google Analytics and events and goals you have set up, hopefully, within that platform, and then how to understand ROI. One of the important beats about ROI, I mentioned this in part 1 of the series. There was a poll done in 2016 from across the country. This was 2,000 marketers. 40% of those polled could not show the ROI of their marketing efforts, marketing and communications efforts. That's a huge number. So almost half the people that are in a marketing or communications role can't prove that their efforts are leading to an ROI for their organization. That's a huge missed opportunity. And that's one of the main reasons we put this series together, to help you connect the dots of data that users are providing to you and your website, and then hopefully connect it back to ROI for the efforts that you're putting in on the marketing side of things. So let's get started. So a quick review on our mission statement on why we use analytics. We use analytics to define the ideal user experience to help you establish the value of your important user interactions. I highlighted that middle line because that's the power of analytics right there, and setting up events through your analytics. Identify the important user interactions. Identify those steps and those calls to action that are actually important to you as a business. It doesn't matter the number of page views, doesn't matter the number of visits to the site. If none of those lead to an actual call to action that's important to your business, it doesn't matter to you as a marketer. So that's the line we're going to focus on today, is those user interactions, and then how to determine ROI from those interactions and those calls to action that users click on. So as an overview to the dashboard, what we're showing here is the kind of your standard analytics dashboard. When you log into Google Analytics, you see data that's probably very similar to this. It's very generic values. It just shows organic search. Here's where the traffic is coming from, your acquisition. And if you took a look at this dashboard, you would say, oh my God, look at that, organic search and direct are very important. Both of those appear to be neck and neck in getting us visitors, either new or returning, to our website. Now, when you add in one layer of intelligence to setting up an actual event or a conversion tracking on your site, what you now see is some intelligence from that data. So now, as you can see in the third column to the right there, organic search is actually way more important for a conversion rate. So you see up top there, it says our goal 1 conversion rate for this website organic search is actually giving you more of those conversions than direct, and way more, 8 times more it looks like. So when you add in events in your analytics, when you open your dashboard, you'll get a lot more intelligence a lot quicker than if you kind of fend through all the data that analytics is throwing at you. And that's what brings us to today. In part 2 of our series, we talked about setting up events and goals using Tag Manager. I highly encourage you to check that one out if you don't use Tag Manager, because it gives you a lot more power as a marketing person, not as an IT person. So you can set up all the events on your website without having to involve any IT staff. So that gives you kind of the benefit of using events and goals, setting them up, and having a defined purpose for your analytics in your marketing plan. I'm going to pass it over to Allison now. Next slide when I go forward. She's going to talk about how to estimate goal and event values within analytics. There's 2 different ways you can do that.
All right, thanks, Tim. So there are 2 parts of calculating your return on investment, or your ROAS, your return on ad spend. First, you're going to need to know how much an action is actually worth on your website. So I'm going to cover that. And then you're going to need to determine how much investment it took to achieve that action, which is what Claire is going to talk about next. So first, we're going to determine the values, and then we're going to talk about investment to have that 2-part equation. So I'm going to talk about figuring out for any given click or action on your site, figuring out how much that is actually worth to your organization. So there are essentially 2 different ways that you can do this. First, and this is the way that we would recommend that you do this, if you can figure out the actual value to your business of what a click on your website is worth, that is far better than our second method, which still works and still can provide a lot of actionable data, but finding out your actual estimated value really can help you determine the ROI of what you're doing. So it does require data. It does require a little math, so we're going to go through some math this morning, but it really is the only way you can get that true picture of ROI. If you can't do that, that is okay. A value is better than no value at all. So the second way is to actually create representative values. And I'll talk through that in more detail, but it can help you compare how content is working based on what marketing channels you're using. So you can look at that example that Tim showed and see, oh, organic search has more value. It can help you compare different content against itself, and it can also show you which audience segments are providing the most value. So representative values still have a lot of value to your organization, but if we can, we're going to recommend actually figuring out that actual value. So we're going to start with our recommended method, figuring out the actual event and goal values. And we're going to use Net as our example again here, and Net is one of our clients that we've used as an example in our other 2 webinars, and they are an organization that works with major retail organizations on all of their toughest IT challenges. And just as a reminder, all the values that you're going to see today are just for example purposes only, but I did want to refresh you on our major goal for Net, which was making sure that we increase warm leads for Net sales team. So we went through all the different KPIs for that and how that plays out on the website. So we're going to use that as our example today. So for the purposes of this example, I'm going to flip this over so it starts to look a little bit more like a traditional conversion funnel. We now have our website audience on the top, those prospective customers, and then some macro and micro conversions they can take on the site in the middle, ultimately laddering up to that main goal of increasing warm leads. So just flip that over a little bit. Now it looks even more like a funnel, so we're starting to show that actual conversion funnel. And we are missing one final piece in this funnel, and this is pretty common, especially if you have your main conversion taking place on a different website. You're not going to have potentially the main value to your organization in your analytics, but it's still a really important part of your conversion funnel. And for net, that is a signed contract. So that's not something that they're tracking on the website, but it is something that we need to keep in mind. In our last webinar, Tom talked about extending that measurement plan across your digital ecosystem. And this might be a place where a CRM or a sales platform would come into play so that you could actually track how many of those warm leads from the website turn into actual new business. All right, so for our example here, we're going to try and figure out how much a contact button click is worth. So this is one of the first steps in our funnel of getting to our larger goal of submitting a lead form. So I have our funnel here visualized, and we're going to start with numbers that we know. So we have page view tracking on the website. We have audiences defined in Google Analytics. So we know that net gets about 100,000 prospect visits each year. So that's our prospect visits up there at the top of our funnel. And we have an event set up for our contact button clicks. So we know that in that same time frame, we had 200 clicks on that contact button. And again, these numbers are just representative for example purposes. And we know that submitting a lead form, which is actually both a event and a goal, so that's why you're seeing it twice there, it's an event goal, one of our macro conversions. We know we had 50 submissions of that lead form. So from 200 down to 50. And then from our CRM and sales team, we know that of those 50 form fills, 10 of those were actual qualified leads. So I think that all of us know that if you have a form on your website, not everyone who fills out the form is going to be your actual prospective customer. So some might be, trying to sell you something or just wanting to do general contact. So it is worth figuring out of those form fills, not just assuming that all of those are qualified leads, but actually figuring out how many of them are. So our final piece is determining how those turn into an actual signed contract. So we've got 2 there. So that might take a little bit more digging. You might have to talk to your sales team. You might have to look at your CRM data. If you can track across multiple platforms, you might be able to integrate that data a little bit more efficiently. But getting those numbers, talking to your sales team, might take a little bit of digging, but it's definitely worth pursuing. And if you are missing a step in this funnel, perfect is really the enemy of good here. If you're missing one vital link in the chain, you're going to want to make an educated guess and then reevaluate after some time. So I'm going to add in our drop-off rates because we'll use those in our next step to calculate values. So that's just our drop-off from website visits all the way down to signed contracts. And so again, I'm going to start here with a number that I know. So we're now going to do the value side of this equation. So we're going to say $100,000 is our average value of a signed contract. And again, just an example, we're using 100,000 because it's a nice round number. It'll make our math a little bit easier today. So with only 20% of our warm leads actually converting into sales, that means a warm lead from the website is worth $20,000. And because of those form fills, there's another 20% drop off where those that fill out the form, not all of those are legitimate qualified leads. That makes a lead form fill on the website worth $4,000. So you can see we're just kind of working our way back here. I do want to reiterate the importance of understanding the difference between a lead on your website and a real lead. This is where you see that drop off really take effect. If we just said, oh, everyone who fills out a form is worth 20,000 or even 100,000, our values would be really inflated. So it's important here to understand that drop off because we have a more realistic value of 4,000 for that lead form fill. And adding in our drop off here of the 200 people who click the contact CTAs, only a quarter of them submit that form. So that makes that contact button, that button we're trying to figure out how much it was worth $1,000. And we'll just play it out here for website visits, and our website visits are worth $2. So it's always nice, that's not something that you can actually value in Google Analytics, page views, but it is nice to know generally how much a website visit nets you. It's something that you can use when you're looking at awareness campaigns, for example, to say, oh, well, we got, 50,000 visits from this particular campaign. It's about $2 of value. We can guess what that ROI is there. So that is how you kind of work your way backwards and figure out that value. It does require that you have events set up. So as Tim mentioned, you will want to go back and check out our webinar 2 for tips on getting events set up in advance. And once you know one of these major values on your website, so we know a lead form fill is worth $4,000. We have a goal set up for that. You can then look at any other KPI that ladders up to that goal and figure out how many people take that action. So they look at a case study and they read the case study all the way, or they share some of your content on social. How much of those people are actually converting through to become a legitimate lead? And then you can actually value them based on that. So here we just have some representative numbers where you might have 10% of the people who read a case study all the way through ultimately go on to fill out a lead form fill. You can then use that to determine the value of that case study read. So once you have one of these numbers, it's a lot easier to kind of work your way backwards. All right, so moving on to representative value. So that's actual value, and if you can do that, it's a really valuable step, pun intended, I guess, to take. But if you can't, a representative value still does give you quite a bit of data. So here we're gonna look at our audience segment, our funnel again. And what you wanna do is you wanna take your major conversions, so those are gonna be your goals on your website, and value them at $100. So that's gonna be your biggest value that you're gonna use, and you value those at $100, and you've got very nice conversion rates for those. Then you add in your KPIs, and you essentially take a look at how far away that KPI is from your ultimate conversion. So whether or not that is something that is a highly engaged action, like submitting a contact form, or it's a less engaged action, like scrolling all the way down through some content, or sharing, which might have a little bit less of an impact on your ultimate goals. So you want to take a look at how far that is and then assign it a representative value. So it's nice to use these round numbers, like $50, 75, 25. Sometimes I'll use 20, 40, 60, 80. But the idea here is to make an educated guess about how far away that value is from your ultimate conversion, and then assign it a representative value. So then you've still got a value for every action on your website that you can use to compare content against different channels, audiences. You can still compare those values in analytics, but they're not real values, and they're not as applicable for actually determining your ROI. Some people, to really drive home the point that it's not a real value, like to use $1 as your actual conversions, and then use 50 cents, 25 cents for your micro conversions. So that's something that you can do as well. I tend to go the $100 route because it's easier to have round numbers, but this works really well if you don't want your stakeholders to be confused regarding the value, because sometimes if you have enough of those $100 conversions add up, it can start to look like a real value, and that's something you want to keep in mind. So this is another way that you can do a representative value just with smaller numbers. All right, so before we move on to talk about the investment side of things, I want to talk about a few quick do's and don'ts. So do remember to actually add values. That's really the most important thing. If they have to be representative values because you don't know what some of those conversion points are, or because your conversion points are a little more nebulous, that happens sometimes too, it's okay. Just make sure you add some sort of value, representative or actual. Another thing that you want to do is make sure you change your values as you get more data. So I had some data when I was going through these examples. I knew that 25% of people dropped off between filling out the form and actually becoming a lead, or between clicking the contact button and filling out the form. So as you collect more data, you'll start to see those values change over time, and you might have one year where you've got a 10% drop off and another year where you've got a 40% drop off. So it's important to revisit those values over time and make sure that they're still accurate. And again, if you can assign a real value, do. It really is the only way to calculate ROI and ROAS. But if not, even a representative value is going to get you some actionable data. Don't mix your methods. So this is something that I could see being tempting to do if you have some idea of actual values for a specific conversion, but then for another one, you really don't know. If you mix those methods, you're not going to be able to meaningfully compare. So you're going to be looking at real values for some things, representative values for other things, and it's not going to give you a good sense of what's working for you and what isn't. So pick a method and stick to it, either actual or representative. And really don't worry about making an educated guess. I think this can be a really intimidating process for some, especially if you're missing a few data points or you're not really sure about which pieces of the funnel and what your drop-off rates are. Make an educated guess. You have a lot of knowledge about your business. You have a lot of resources available to talk to, like your sales team or your customer service team if your goal is about customer support or retention. So you can really make a lot of educated guesses and still get some good actionable data. And then as time goes on, you'll start to have to make fewer guesses because you'll be tracking more. So never be afraid to make a guess. You're gonna get close, and then you can always adjust. So now that we've gone through the methods for calculating the value of actions on that value side of the equation, Claire is going to show you how to take that value along with what you've invested and turn that into a calculation for ROI or ROAS.
Okay, so let's work on coming to a conclusion about our return on investment, our return on ad spend, and make some positive changes for your business based on what your analytics tell you. I'm going to start by showing what goes into measuring your investments, showing you 2 ways to calculate those returns, and then finally I'm going to demonstrate 2 interactive calculators that can help you do this for your own company. So this image should look pretty familiar. Allison just showed us how to assign values to each of the micro and macro interactions that you see in this funnel. So now I'm going to take us up a level and assign values to the channels that sent each of those prospective customers to your website in the first place. Before they, checked out any of your pages, before they completed any of your events or goals or things like that. So for the sake of example, and also just to make my math without a calculator here easier, I'm going to say that the total marketing budget for the year is going to be $250,000. You might have a very different budget from that, but let's just keep things simple for now. And of that 250, we're going to say that 100 goes to paid search, 100 to direct mail, and then the remaining 50 goes to email campaigns. So your users do have other ways of finding you, of course, and you're going to see what those were through your acquisitions tab of analytics. So organic search and direct traffic and referrals, and each of these paid channels too can have a lift or an impact on things like organic and direct. But for now, we're going to look at the paid channels and sources only. Your marketing mix might include other things too, so TV or radio, ads on Instagram or Facebook, or sponsorships as well. But let's look at paid search first and really focus on that channel. This is a channel that many B2B companies use to capture those interested customers when they're looking for options, if they're in comparison mode between 2 companies, or confirming, maybe what they've heard about certain options. And it's also relatively easy to track. And that's because the channel itself tells you how many people saw your ad via impressions, how many of those people clicked on your ads, and then through our analytics, we can tell what those people did who came in off of specific ads. So just from the Google Ads or Bing Ads platform, you can tell, that each click costs you, let's say, $6.67 for a cost per click. And then when we layer in the event and goal information from your analytics, we can see the advertising costs for other actions too, like reading a case study or visiting the site in the first place. So we can see that if we spent 100,000 on paid search to get 15,000 site visits or clicks, maybe 300 of those ended up filling out the form. And then of all of those form completions, maybe some of them were qualified, but just not ready to sign a contract yet. Maybe some of them thought that they understood what you provided, but it's not going to be a good fit for right now. But let's say that 2 of those are going to become new clients. So even if 2 of those sign a contract, that means that we spent $100,000 to get 2 new clients. And depending on your business, that might swing really far in one direction or another. That might be a 1-to-1 ROI, maybe a 2-to-1 ROI, maybe even more. So some of our, large manufacturing contracts or something like a long-term business banking customer might net you a much higher value than, something like $100,000. Okay, so Allison showed us how to calculate the value of each of your events and goals. So now let's look at the equation for return on ad spend, or ROAS. So this term ROAS might be familiar to some of you, but I know that it's new for others, and ROI tends to be a little bit more common, but we're going to go through this one from start to finish. ROAS is, I find it to be a simpler equation. It's just really straightforward. There's only a couple numbers to factor in. So to get to ROAS, what you do is you simply take your revenue or the value from all of the actions that the ad source produced, and then you're going to divide that by the total cost of the ad source. So we know that paid search cost 100,000, so we'll see that in there. And then we know that paid search resulted in 2 new contracts. And then we're just saying for simplicity that each contract is worth a nice round $100,000. So 100,000 times 2 is 200,000. Like I said, I'm keeping math very easy for myself today. And then divide that by 100,000 and we get a ROAS of 2. So if you spend way more on paid search and you get a lot more signed contracts, or maybe your contracts are worth 50,000, or maybe your contracts are worth 500,000 or 1.2 million, you can see how this calculation can be used all across those different scenarios. But it's a really good metric for letting you know how much more you can afford to invest. And then you can determine your own kind of tolerable risk factor. Okay, so ROAS is communicated in the form of a number, not a percentage. So it could be 1, it could be 1.2. In this case, it's 2. And just like with ROI, the higher your return on ad spend, the better. And it's a good time now as you're setting up your event and goal values, as you're looking to calculate ROAS or ROI, to really work with your stakeholders and get a good sense of their risk tolerance, right? So, if you're investing $50,000 in a brand new advertising tactic, do you really expect to get, a ROAS of 1? So to make back your $50,000, or in order to keep running that tactic, do you need to see a 2x return on your ad spend? So if you spend 50,000, you need to make an additional 100,000. It's a great way for you to just kind of keep tabs, and maybe the ROAS is lower as you introduce new tactics. Maybe you change your website up, or improve your calls to action on the website, and then your ROAS goes up. All of those are just good things to see. Can you tolerate a ROAS of 1.8 if it means a larger number of contracts, or do you need to see a specific number? So next we'll look at ROI, which some organizations prefer to use, and at least in our experience, it seems to be that more people are familiar with this term and have been using it longer. So ROI, of course, stands for return on investment, and it's expressed as a percentage, which is why the calculation is a little bit different. So to get ROI, you're going to take the revenue earned and subtract your original investment, and then divide that number by your investment. So let's throw the numbers in there because it's easier to kind of visualize. So again, we got 2 contracts that were worth 100,000 each. So we've got the total revenues, that 200,000 that you see there first, minus our initial paid search investment of 100,000, divided by 100,000. So what we see is this ROI of 100%. So expressed in a different way, ROI is basically telling you what your net profit is. So rather than just taking, hey, we made $200,000, we really need to look at the net profit, not gross. So our profit, or our ROI in this case, is 100%. So what we're saying basically is that we've doubled our initial investment. Like I said before, some companies are more risk tolerant, and they would keep investing more and more until their ROI is just barely in the positive, while others are risk averse and want this ROI to be, in the double digits or triple digits before they invest anything else into marketing, whether that's a new tactic or investing more funds into an existing tactic. Okay, so the next example is direct mail, and I don't plan to go through this in as much detail as I did for paid search because we've already got the foundation there. But let's say that we spent 100,000 on direct mail for the year, and direct mail tends to get a slightly lower website visit rate because people can't just click on a link. So it might take them a week or two to really remember that piece of mail that they got. Maybe they search for a term rather than typing in a direct URL. Maybe they see your direct mail piece and toss it out, and then later they go on and access you through paid search. So there's a whole lot of different reasons why people don't visit websites as frequently from direct mail as other channels. But let's say that from a national highly targeted direct mail campaign to all the CEOs that you want to reach, you get just 1 signed contract. So we see over in that left column, maybe out of $100,000 budget, we got 2,000 site visits, 200 case study reads, 80 people filled out your form, and then 1 person signed your contract. So if you were selling $20 widgets, that is not great, because if you made $20 off of a $100,000 campaign, obviously that's not going to be something that you want to continue year over year. But you're not, right? So you're starting these years-long client relationships with your customers that are probably going to build in value over time. So spending $100,000 to get 1 new client in the door might be a really good investment for you. And at a glance, we can already see that we're going to have a positive ROAS and a positive ROI. All right, so this next slide is a little different. As you plan your budgets and as you project your ROI or ROAS for the coming year, you might have more efficiency or less efficiency in your digital media spend, depending on all sorts of things. So depending on your targeting, your creative, and basically your cost of doing business. And so I've included a slide here that shows kind of what to expect for a click-through rate by different industries. So the yellow bar there is just broadly B2B. So we've got a 2.41% click-through rate for paid search. And then we see the number on the bottom is almost a 0.5% click-through rate for Google Display Network. I know we have one person at least on the line from an e-commerce company, and so that industry is getting an almost 2.7% click-through rate on search. So e-commerce is going to get something a little bit higher. Finance and insurance is higher still. So I'm going to go back a slide just to say that this cost per click of $50 for direct mail, or back quite a bit further for the paid search where we had that $6.67 cost per click, that might vary a lot based off of not only what you're bidding and who's bidding against you, but also just based off of your industry, how many barriers your potential customers face in reaching you. So then we have another slide here that's our cost per lead by industry. So this is from Marketing Charts, it's from 2017, but it's basically showing just kind of an average cost per lead for different segments within B2B types of categories. So we've got IT and services, health and medical here, having almost a $300 cost per lead. So really when we're looking at a cost per click versus a cost per lead, this can maybe help you start to see, you know, the cost per click of $6.67 to ultimately get a couple form fills. You know, you can start to determine if you're still going to get a positive ROI for each of those. So after we dug into this research too, it's pretty hard to tell if they're talking about any old lead. So we talked about, you know, not every form fill on your site is going to be somebody that turns into a customer. We like to keep all of our cost per lead reporting as cost per qualified lead. So somebody who's in the right market at the right time with the right budget who could potentially hire you. You know, there's a lot of other factors where they might not decide to do that in this moment. But that cost per qualified lead can actually go up quite a bit. And it's a really helpful indicator for knowing if you're going to get that positive ROAS or positive ROI. That was easy. So looking at ROI and ROAS for things like direct mail even, or for paid search, certainly even, you know, Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, those are always pretty easy to calculate. But gain and investment are, as we all know, not easy to calculate all the time. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I just intentionally made all that seem easy. Divide A by B and you've got your number. But you're probably thinking right now, okay, not all my marketing tactics are that easy to track. So sometimes the return is tough to attribute because, you know, somebody might visit your website multiple times before converting, or maybe people are converting from non-digital, not as trackable sources like billboards that have been up for 6 months, or TV that's running on an OTT and it's not a set schedule, or direct mail that you don't have active tracking on. So that's a really, really common challenge, and we don't want to ignore it. So what if somebody comes to your site multiple times before they complete a conversion? Or what if they came in on non-digital sources? Returns can be measured through lifetime value reports within analytics postings. And you can track websites that are searched for digital tactics by using, you know, a special offer code, short TM code, what's called the URL, personal uniform resource locator. So those are all some ways to help you see who's clicking on your ad from what. Another example would be, you know, for those of you who listen to podcasts, you might see, you know, that they'll say, hey, go to HelloFresh.com/podcast name to receive $50 off your next order. So then, you know, HelloFresh knows how many people came to your site as a result of hearing this ad on Pod Save America, or, you know, insert your podcast name here. So hosting events was a big push for you this year. Then your return can be measured by something a little bit softer. So maybe satisfaction surveys sent out post-event, or donations that you received at the event. And sometimes it might just be as simple as, you know, isolating the geography of where a specific event occurred, and then looking and seeing if you have an increase in your website traffic during that amount of time. So even if you're investing in marketing tactics where it's harder to gauge the return, it's possible to do so if you get creative. And, you know, feel free to ask us in the questions if you have specific return or investment that's really hard for you to measure, or you can always email us. Those are the kinds of puzzles that we love to solve. Okay, so putting it all together, we will calculate the return on investment from our direct mail campaign. You know, so the revenue is going to be all of the conversions that resulted from this Perl or an offer code, or maybe by zip code. So if you sent mail to a specific geography on a known date. And then on this slide, we have, our investment might include all of these following things. So it's going to be the time that it took your team to plan and write and design this direct mail piece. Maybe you purchased a photo from Getty, or you went to an outside printer. You're definitely going to have postage costs, and that can really range based off of the geography that you have. So this is going to be a lot of work, especially when it comes to measuring your team's time on something. But you can start to see how your equation would start to take shape if this is how you want to measure ROI. It looks like a lot, but really once you get a sense for what you're measuring and why, we promise that it'll be worth it. So here, we have what that might look like. I have this planning question mark because it's really up to you to look at how many hours did your team spend? Can you calculate a hard value on that team member's time? Maybe it's an outside contractor or an agency that you worked with, and in that case, you have a hard cost. So here, we've got photo rights costing $50,000, and then printing and postage costing $50,000. So again, just an example of what you might consider doing if you're going to take all of these things into account. Okay, so the next benefit of being able to calculate your ROI and ROAS is that it's going to help you determine what budget you can safely set, or it can tell you what your existing budget can get you. So I'm about to show you 2 online calculators that we've created to help with just that. The first one is going to ask you what your annual budget is. You put in some key metrics to determine how many conversions you can get with that budget, and then the calculator kind of spits out what your ROAS would be if all of those factors were true. And then the second one basically asks, how many signed contracts does your organization need to get in order to survive or thrive, ideally, depending on how you want to use the calculator. So once again, you enter those key metrics like your conversion rate or the cost per click that you have historically gotten in the past year from a given tactic, and then out comes the budget that you would need to invest that would be required if you're going to hit that target for signed contracts. Okay, so this is the ROAS calculator. So you're going to get a link to all of our slides right after we finish. I believe an hour after is when it will send. So you will have a link to this revenue calculator, to this nifty little app. So we're going to pick a tactic. So let's use paid search again. So we were saying that our 2019 budget for paid search is 100,000. And of course, if I'm typing and talking, I'm going to be a little slow on both, so forgive me. So then we have the cost per click is set to $25 here, because maybe that's a good industry average. But our calculator allows you to change that. So if you've historically seen, a $7 cost per click, you can kind of see how that impacted the number of clicks you got. And then at the end of the day, how the return on ad spend shifts based off of that. So let's say that we're getting a $15 cost per click. You'll notice that one of the things that stayed the same on this chart is our conversion rate, right? So we can impact the conversion rate by making significant impacts or significant changes to our website, or by running A/B testing and figuring out which buttons have a higher conversion rate on the site. Maybe it's by changing what your landing page is and getting people more directly into your funnel or into your system. So let's say that your conversion rate for everything, we made a big change, we're going to change it to 3%. And so maybe that's the goal of a new landing page or A/B testing and optimization, or maybe you've invested in a new website and so you can safely project that your conversion rate is going to go up to 3%. So the calculator now shows you that, at this $100,000 budget, at a cost per click of $15, which is, pretty competitive, pretty high, we can see that our return on ad spend is going to be 4. So the purpose of this calculator is twofold. It's going to show you what you can realistically expect from your campaigns, and then it's going to show you how important it really is to continually monitor and optimize those ad campaigns. Because what that's going to do is it's going to lower your cost per click, it's going to increase your conversion rate on the ad itself, and it's going to increase your click-through rate. So, if you're letting your ads get stagnant and just kind of running the same thing over and over and over, and a new competitor steps into the market, now all of a sudden your cost per click is 30. Well, that just reduced the number of potential clicks that we've gotten significantly. So we're only getting half as many clicks now because maybe we weren't staying up to date on our ad copy. So that's going to take the ROAS down to 2. So next I'm going to shift into this other calculator, which is our basically going to show you how much you'll need to spend in order to get the conversions you need for a good ROAS. And good ROAS, like I said, is going to be determined by your organization. So let's say that you are promoting a one-time event or a conference that costs your attendees $450, and you need 35 registrations to cover your event, your speaker costs, your promotion costs. So you'll see the budget then fill in down at the bottom. So you'll see, that this is how much we would have to spend to get this many customer conversions. So now we can see, basically it just flips the whole thing on its head to say, okay, we still have a positive ROAS, but can we afford to get, this type of budget approved, over $500,000 to get these 450 conversions. So you can take this and experiment with, what does it look like if we have a really low cost per click but a high conversion rate, which you'll see happen with different types of ad platforms. Or the flip side, maybe you're running an awareness tactic, so your cost per click is super low, and your conversion rate is super low, and then you can start to see how all of those metrics change based off of those factors. So we highly recommend that you check those out, give us feedback, let us know how it's working for you too. So to wrap us up, now that you have both sides, Allison is going to walk through some reporting tools that can make our lives as marketers much, much easier.
All right, so most of our conversation today was about how to estimate the value of your on-site actions, determine what your investment costs are, and then use those numbers to calculate your ROI or ROAS. But you're probably interested in calculating these metrics for a reason, and our guess is that's because you have stakeholders that you need to be able to show them how you're doing. So as Tim mentioned at the very top of our webinar today, not that many marketers know how they're doing or are able to communicate that back. And now hopefully you have a better idea of how to calculate how you're doing. And then we want to make sure that you have the tools to report that back to your stakeholders as well. So there are a few different ways that we can report back to stakeholders. You can do it manually, and that is one way to do it. It allows you to present exactly what you want, but it's not very visual automatically. You might have to put a lot of work into making that look nice. And it can take a lot of work every time you want to report out. So that is something that you can do. A lot of folks do that, but it's definitely not as easy as some of the more automated methods. You can also use the Google Analytics reports that come straight out of Google Analytics, and those can be emailed on a regular basis to the stakeholders of your choosing. The main downside of these is that they can contain a lot of data, and it's not easy to combine a lot of different reports together. So you're sending a report on a specific media channel or a specific content area on your site, and it's one report for each of those metrics. So It's a good tool. The automated emailing is very nice, but it is not particularly customizable if you want to show a lot of different types of things. Google Analytics also offers custom dashboards, so you can also send those out via email to leadership on a regular basis. Those solve a lot of the challenges of Google Analytics reports, but they don't get that detailed because you're limited to a specific number of widgets per dashboard. I believe it's 10 or 12, and it doesn't allow you to get really in depth on anything. So they're very customizable, but you're not necessarily providing a lot of details there. Our pick for reporting is Google Data Studio, and that is a free tool that pulls directly from analytics. It's highly customizable. You can make it very visual, so it's pretty to look at, and stakeholders can see all the different charts and graphs in your brand's colors. And you can choose to go deeper on certain topics and remain high level on others depending on what you need. So it's a really great tool. Here's an example of what that looks like. You can customize all these reporting slides. You can use your brand colors and fonts. And once you've set it up, you can send it out on a regular basis without having to make any changes to it. And your leadership can actually change the date range to whatever they'd like up here in that upper right corner, which you can position anywhere on the page. So it really does give you some nice customization options and also looks very nice for your stakeholders. So this dashboard, again, has a really nice example. Tim showed us one earlier, straight out of analytics. But this one has a really nice example of why adding values can actually broaden the picture of your marketing efforts. Organic search here brings in the most users, but it's not actually the highest value for the organization. In this case, it is direct. So that's the opposite of what we saw earlier. But it does have a higher value for direct, and we can see that very easily looking at this dashboard with values added. So that brings us to the end of our webinar and our three-part series on getting the most value out of your analytics. We hope this has been helpful for you and you have some new ideas to try out yet this year. Looks like we have time for maybe just one question. But if you have additional questions, please feel free to email Tim at the end of this and we'll get back to you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, one question that came in, why is it bad to mix actual values and representative values? Allison, you reviewed that earlier. You want to reiterate that?
Yeah, so really the reason why that doesn't work well is because it makes it really difficult to compare. If you're looking at something, a conversion that's an actual value and is a nice high number of, let's say, $2,000 for that conversion, and then you're trying to compare the same channel against another conversion that has a representative value of $1, you're going to be looking at that and think, oh, well, this channel or this campaign or tactic only had a return on investment, much lower return on investment, because you're looking at that representative value, comparing it with an actual value for a different type of campaign or conversion. So that's really why it doesn't work. It's just showing you numbers that are not on par with each other. They're not the same. So really, it's good to use representative values if you can't calculate actual values. It'll still allow you to compare things on the same level. It just won't allow you to calculate ROI or ROAS in depth, but never mix them because it can get confusing.
All right, excellent. It's almost noon, so we'll sign off. Thanks a ton for attending. You'll get an email with the links to all 3 of the webinars that we have presented throughout May. If you have ideas on topics you'd like to see covered in the future, we're going to have a link in the email for a survey to fill out. And give us your thoughts if you want to see different topics covered. Thanks a ton. Have an awesome day. Take care.